Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. And today's guest makes me want it to be 1990 again. It's Brenda Sauter, bassist for the band Wild Carnation, The Feelies, Speed the Plough, and the Trypes. But she didn't start off on the bass. In fact, she started off playing the piano before moving to guitar. She began playing with her friends, which makes sense. Music basically defined her friend group at that point. She was playing a lot of folk music. And around that time, Brenda also began playing melodica. Yes, melodica, the instrument all guitarists secretly wish they could play. But one of the groups she was in won a talent show judged by famed New York DJ cousin Brucie. But there were too many guitars in the bands she was in, so she began playing bass. That proved fortuitous, because after sitting in with the Trypes, they eventually approached her about joining the band. That started a connection that eventually led to the Feelies, Speed the Plough, and eventually Wild Carnation. Not only did she join the band, she replaced famed bass player Michael Imperioli. He's also dipped his toes into acting. Maybe you've seen some of his work. But it took a little while for Brenda to accept the offer because she didn't have a cassette player in her truck and couldn't listen to the demos. But once Brenda joined, they started working on their debut, Tricycle. She just didn't know she'd be playing bass and singing too. The album has been remastered and re-released, and in addition to that, there's a treasure trove of extra tracks. And there's more good news. Superbus, the follow-up to Tricycle, will be given the same treatment in the fall. So follow Wild Carnation on Facebook, pick up the album on Bandcamp, and keep checking back for updates. Follow us at Performance ANX on Twitter and Instagram. Help support the show with coffee money at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety, or by buying stuff like shirts, coffee mugs, or shower curtains at performanceanx.threadless.com. So let's jump right into today's episode with Brenda Sauter of Wild Carnation on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Hi, this is Brenda Sauter from the Feelies and Wild Carnation, formerly of the Trypes and Speed the Plough. And you're listening to the Performance Anxiety Podcast. And please check out our re-release of Tricycle and Superbus that will be coming out in the fall of 2023, both on vinyl. What was just on the radio, so this was total serendipity. I just took my phone, and I'm not a big Facebook user, but from time to time I will use it more.
Okay.
But then there are many times when I just don't even bother, or I just scroll a little bit, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I was just I just turned it on and just scrolled down a little bit, and I saw all I saw was WPRB John Solomon show with a guest DJ. And it said, something like, I'm on the air tonight till 8:00. And I thought, I've got, we're getting in dinner mode. So I'll just turn PRB on. And then I start hearing him mentioning the Feelies. And so it turned, I'm not sure what time it started, but so it's a fundraiser and it's pitting Killdozer against the Feelies. And it's all covers.
Oh my gosh.
So it'll be Killdozer doing a cover and then the Feelies doing a cover. And so the idea was if you wanted to vote, you'd pledge. Oh. So it came down to 8:00 was like a couple minutes before 8:00. He announced that Killdozer had won just by a hair. Oh. But they do have to officially compile the numbers because the pledges, I guess there could have been pledges coming in, at 7:59 or whatever. So, but that was the unofficial thing, but it was hysterical.
That's so awesome.
I had no idea. It was just serendipity that I just happened to turn it on. And there was nothing that I saw that mentioned the Feelies or this fundraising aspect.
That is so wild.
It was,
Gosh. Well,
and it was a good way to hear all the covers, like all the, some of the recordings I'd forgotten about or didn't realize that John Solomon would have had access to.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh.
So, wow. Fun show to listen to.
Oh, I bet. Oh, man. That would have been a great one to prep for the show with. Damn.
Yeah. Well, it's out there. I'm sure it's going to be archived pretty soon.
Yeah, I'll have to check. Have to see if I can find that. So the way I normally like to start off is to find out a little bit about how you got into music to begin with. Was it something you grew up with? Was it important to the family? Did they have a lot going on in the house when you were growing up?
There were musicians on my mother's side, and actually beyond musicians, singers. So when I was growing up with 3 older brothers, we all took music lessons. It was just sort of a given that we would have music.
Okay.
And they took accordion, I took piano. So my parents didn't actually actively play music, but it was within the extended family. In 5th grade, I took up the guitar. My 5th grade teacher said one day, I teach guitar, so if anyone wants to take lessons, let me know. And, I don't know why that resonated with me, but I obviously went home and asked my parents if I could take guitar lessons. And they obviously said yes. So that was the first string instrument that I played for a long time. So I was playing, the groups that I was in, talent shows, or the people who became friends. We all got together through music. So it was guitar and singing. That was my first thing.
So that was what was going to be my next question is, were you singing when you were that young as well? Was that something that you started early on?
Yeah, I was singing. Well, the guitar lessons that I got were nothing really fancy. So the way that I was taught was through songs, the lyrics, and chords. So my teacher I had a notebook, and the teacher would write out, a song and the chords. And a lot of them were protest songs or really obscure folk songs. Yeah, like one of, and I hope I have that book somewhere, but I'm not sure if I do. But there was, there was a folk song about, I can't think of the original name of it, but one of those, folk songs like Someone Always Dies, and there's heartbreak in it.
Right.
But it was a song about the Silky.
Oh.
So this was a legendary half man, half animal creature.
Okay.
And so it's a song about the Silky, and then I think they all end up dying by the end. But that tune, so the song that she gave me was that tune, but the lyrics, the name of the song was Hiroshima.
Oh.
So it's a song about a 7-year-old child who has been killed in Hiroshima, and he or she is a ghost and wandering around. So it's an anti-war song. But man, I was in 5th grade, and I'm seeing lyrics and singing songs about war, and
wow.
And some Joan Baez protest songs, and so it was kind of heavy stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, getting you socially conscious early.
I guess that's the big influence of generally being against war, and hoping that the world becomes a better place at some point. So yeah, it was. I was not taught lead guitar at all. It was just learning chords and singing along with those chords.
When did playing with other people, when did forming bands come into the picture and playing out?
That started when I was, maybe 8th grade, but 8th grade was the year of, actually 7th grade, meeting new friends who played guitar. So we would just play for the fun of it. You go over each other's house and, learn songs together. But as far as playing out, that was more sophomore, junior year in high school.
Wow.
Pretty much the same group of people, but now we were, I guess, getting better at what we were doing and doing a little more arranging. But it was mostly talent shows, whether in the school or there was a cousin Brucie talent show that was open to the public. And we actually won, or we were one of the top winners. So, God, I don't even remember what the prize was, or auditioning to get on a telethon. So yeah, those were like, cable stations back then were kind of obscure. And so there would sometimes be a telethon.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PERFORMANCEANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD.
Yeah, so it was a lot of, we did, we would play Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, some Beatles, Dylan. So we were pretty much folkies.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Were you still playing guitar at that point, or had you moved to bass yet?
That was guitar. Yeah, I also played melodica. I don't know if you know what a melodica is.
I've heard of that, but I'm not sure exactly what it is.
John Batiste, although he's not on the Late Show anymore, it was his main instrument. So it's a keyboard, but it's very small and it's wind powered. So
I just
picture an accordion has bellows.
Yeah. If
you tore the keyboard off the accordion and you blew air through it, that's a melodica. So it's very much like an accordion.
Okay.
But you supply the air through it. So it's got a little mouthpiece and you blow air through it. And you press the keys just like an accordion or a piano.
So it's smaller and lighter, I imagine, too, then.
Oh, very small. So I started playing that. I think that was probably 8th grade. So sometimes I'd play that and the others would play guitars and sing. So
was that different than did the piano lessons help with that at all, or was it completely different?
Absolutely. Yeah. On a melodica, it's only, you could play with 2 hands if you had a stand, an adapter where you can just set it on the table and use it that way. But generally you would hold it in 1 hand and use your right hand to play the keys. So definitely piano, learning piano is, definitely a good thing for approaching melodica.
Okay. So when did you start picking up the bass and playing bass?
That was around age 19, I'd say. So my family moved and then I met, I had a new group of friends. Also, I attended art school after high school.
Okay.
So I met people there. A lot of people who are into art are also into music. So with that group of friends, again, you start to form bands, and people would kind of come and go in that group, but there was sort of a core group. But most of us played guitar, and sometimes I would play keyboard. There was a electric keyboard, but we had no bass player. Occasionally a drummer would sit in, but we really didn't go anywhere. I mean, we had a couple local shows, but nothing. It kind of fizzled before we really did much. So I took up the bass out of necessity, really. It was like, we have too many guitars. I'll just take up the bass. But as I was learning the bass, that's when the group fizzled. But I decided to keep playing the bass anyway. I took lessons for about 6 months, and then my teacher said, well, go join a band. So that was around 80 or maybe 81. But I didn't join a band right away. What I did was I would go out and watch bands and just watch what the bass player was doing and really sort of zone in to how the bass and the drums were working together. Like, that really fascinated me.
Okay.
I would listen to records and just try to figure out what they were doing, like when the kick drum would hit versus the bass. So I found it really interesting, and I was very into trying to just get a feel for the instrument and how it relates to the other instruments. So
you were going to shows to study.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also to enjoy, but just watch what they're doing. Like, even where does the bassist typically stand? Just to kind of take it all in and just learn from what other people were doing.
So it looks to me like the Trypes was your first recording band. Is that the case? Because that's the first thing I could find.
Yes. Yeah. Explorers Hold from 83.
With the guys in the Trypes?
So that was also through art school. I met a woman by the name of Noelle, and she was friends with, well, sort of a friend of a friend, but so she was friends with some of the Heldon people. So that Heldon is a town where the Feelies and the Trypes and the Willies and Young Woo were all associated. And the first time that I saw the Trypes was at Maxwell's.
Oh yeah.
And I might have pinpointed the date. But anyway, so this friend Noelle told me about, the Feelies and the Trypes and these bands that were coming out of Heldon. So we went to Maxwell's, and bongos and the bongos and the Trypes were playing that night. So the Trypes were opening for the bongos, and I'd never heard music like that before. and the clubs that I'd been going to, those were mostly cover bands. In fact, I think they were all cover bands. Oh, and they would play one or two of their own songs. Like typically it would be a cover band doing Bruce Springsteen or Tom Petty, and then they'd say, now we're going to do an original. And people would kind of just turn off from it.
Right, yeah.
So this was a very different scene. Like Maxwell's was bands playing their own music. It was just a really great place and a real hub for this other music scene that like I had no idea existed. So I was just really taken by that whole scene and the sound of the Trypes. And it's kind of a long story, but the short version would be to say that I was given the opportunity to sit in with the Trypes when they were playing a show in Heldon. These various bands, including some of the members of what would become Yolo Tango, would play at a place called the Peanut Gallery. So it was just a bar. It was a local bar. But the deal that they struck up was that they could rehearse there and then in the evening do a show. So this would be a Sunday afternoon rehearsal, and then the bands would take a dinner break and then go back and do an evening show. and then the club would charge admission. So it worked out kind of nicely. You know, the bar probably would have been fairly empty on a Sunday night. So it kind of turned into a little music scene. So I was given the opportunity to play with them one Sunday. And then sometime after that, I got up the nerve to approach John Baumgartner, the songwriter in the Trypes, and said, if you ever want a bass player, I'd love to join. Oh. And then I just left it at that. And then some months later, I got a phone call, and he asked if I wanted to join. And when I got to that first rehearsal, the lineup had changed. You know, I was used to seeing the Trypes with this man named Bruce was the lead singer.
Right, yeah.
And Glenn would play drums, but then I recall one of the shows I went to, Dave Weckerman from the Feelies, a percussionist from the Feelies, was on drums. So I was like, oh, okay, there's this new guy here. All right, you know.
Yeah.
And then when I actually was joining the band, Dave wasn't there, Bruce wasn't there, and it was Bill from the Feelies playing percussion, Stan from the Feelies playing drums. And yeah, so
wow.
I didn't know who they were really,
right,
because Stan and Bill were not in the original Trypes, at least not the Trypes that I saw. So I was wondering, well, who are these guys? Like, who is this?
This is the band I thought it was. And then
came to realize that, oh, okay, these are members of the Feelies, and yeah, so the Halden bands, they didn't have a bass player. So it was a really good instrument to have chosen. And then shortly after that, I was asked to join Young Woo and also the Willies. So those were bands that were coexisting with different personnel, but some crossover personnel. And then eventually the Willies became the Feelies. Like I remember, I'm pretty sure it was Bill saying, we're thinking of becoming the Feelies again. Are you okay with that? And I said, sure. So at that point, the Feelies had done a few shows in 1983. They were playing very sporadically, but also with 3 drummers. So it was Stan, Dave, and Anton. But sometimes Anton wouldn't play and Stan would become the main drummer. Well, I should say before that, Stan sometimes sat in instead of Anton. But then in 83, the Feelies were going to start playing again. And again, it was sporadic, but they didn't want to let any drummers go. So they were going to do these shows with 3 drummers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And actually I came across an article where they were quoted as saying, yeah, we're starting to play again and we're thinking of recording. And then that just never happened. So in the meantime, 1983, the Trypes are finishing the first recording EP called The Explorer's Hold. And so the Feelies just kind of, nothing happened. And then the next thing was 80, I think, in 84, the new Feelies started up.
Okay.
So with Dave and Stan and and this was after The Explorer's Hold had come out.
And you got into the Feelies because the Trypes was comprised of a lot of members of the Feelies then.
Exactly. Okay. So, once you met the people, once you became friends, it was sort of a natural progression to be asked to join the other groups, especially, because they didn't have bass players.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
the Feelies put out a few albums, and I believe it was 4 full-length albums and some EPs, but the band kind of disbanded in 92. What was the reason for the band kind of ending after putting out a decent amount of material? Right.
It was actually 91, July of 91. at Maxwell's. That was our last show. And we actually didn't finish our run at Maxwell's. Typically the Feelies would play at Maxwell's around the 4th of July, and we do 3 nights. And I don't recall if it was 1 or 2 shows, but we didn't do the last one. And that was basically it.
Wow.
Well, the band was burning out. We were on A&M at that time, and the sales weren't as good as A&M had hoped. So we were kind of, in a way, we were being let go, and in a way we were kind of dissolving on our own. There are bands who play hundreds of shows, like Yola Tango. They're constantly touring and putting out albums.
Yeah.
The Feelies never really wanted to tour a lot. I mean, we did to support the albums that we were putting out, but I guess we burned out more easily than other bands. And life on the road is really tough. I mean, people think it's glamorous, but it's really taxing. And you might travel all over, but for the most part, all you see is the inside of a club and whatever vehicle you're traveling in,
right?
Whether it's a home or a bus or whatever. And some people had families, and so we were not into sleeping on floors and traveling, around the United States to do long tours. We were kind of homebodies.
Yeah.
So we burned out more quickly than other bands, or many other bands would have, with playing live, with touring.
I mean, that's an understandable reason. So, I mean, and so the next...
So I guess we felt like we just weren't going to get anywhere further. Like, I mean, in the previous years, you could really feel within the band, like, wow, our audience is getting bigger. We're playing bigger places. We opened for Lou Reed and REM, and it's kind of like an airplane taking off, and you're off the ground, you're taking off. But then in 91, it just seemed like we weren't going to get any further than where we were.
Okay.
And especially without the record company behind you or behind us.
Especially back then, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How long after that was it before you were part of Speed the Plough? Because I think that was the next, it looks like that's the next band you were a part of. And was that something that John invited you to, or were you part of the founding of that?
I was not part of the founding. So so Speed the Plough rose up out of the non-Feelies members. So the Trypes and the Feelies were playing simultaneously.
Okay.
And then as the Feelies were playing more, the Trype members, the non-Feelies Trype members, then formed a group called Speed the Plough.
Okay.
And others joined the group. So it was John and Tony and Mark from the Trypes. And then they did have different personnel on bass and drums. And they put out a record, which Bill Million helped produce. And then, I can't speak too much about that chapter. I'm not sure how many shows Speed the Plough played at that point. But then they kind of disbanded, and I think it was like 91 where, 91, right. The Feelies stopped playing, and then Speed the Plough kind of reorganized with Stan and me in it.
Oh, okay.
And eventually Stan left to join Luna, and then the members of Wild Carnation filled the openings there.
Started on a diamond morning from 16,000 feet above me. We finally found the right direction, even with a broken compass, and all you ever asked was given. Time we had together, it hurts me now.
Okay.
So, but a little bit of crossover, in fact, a bit of crossover between Wild Carnation and Speed the Plough. So 91, the Feelies aren't playing. Speed the Plough gets more active. And then Wild Carnation forms in 92. And then Rich and Chris from Wild Carnation then join Speed the Plough.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Okay, so that was going to be my next question. Was Wild Carnation, did they grow out of Speed the Plough, or was Wild Carnation kind of absorb into Speed the Plough at times? So
it's more Wild Carnation was absorbed into Speed the Plough.
Oh, okay.
So Wild Carnation came about again through Maxwell's. I was in Hoboken. I was playing with a singer-songwriter by the name of Patty Shaw. And she was from New York City, actually still is. And we met each other through Steve Fallon in Hoboken. Steve Fallon was the owner of Maxwell's.
Okay.
And so she was the main songwriter, and I basically backed her up. I did backing vocals and played bass. And we didn't do a lot of shows out, but we did some, and we did some recording. And then I was at Maxwell's. I'm pretty sure I was there at Maxwell's, having come from a rehearsal with Patty Shaw. And the name of that duo was Evaluna, Evaluna. Nothing to do with Luna,
right?
That Stan was in. But I had my bass with me, and Yola Tango was playing at Maxwell's, and that was March of '92. And Chris, who was the drummer, Chris, who would become the drummer of Wild Carnation. So I'm not saying Yola Tango. So so Chris and Rich were at that show, and Chris approached me and said he and a friend were trying to get a band together. Would I be interested? And I said, sure. So Chris gave me a tape, a pretty simple demo tape of what they were working on. And I didn't listen to it right away, and Rich thought that I probably hated it. But it was just that I didn't have a cassette player in my little pickup truck. So it took some time. I wasn't listening to it on the way home, but I did call. Actually, when I called, it was April 8th, and I said I was interested. So April 17th of 1992 was our first rehearsal. So this was Rich on guitar, Chris on drums, and me on bass. And I don't think I even realized that there wasn't a singer. Like, I thought I was just joining as a bass player. Oh, and then realized, okay, I guess I'll be singing. But it all kind of came together very organically. So Rich had a huge backlog of songs, but no lyrics, no melody, or actually some of them he had a melody in mind, but no one was singing in the band yet. So it was basically just drums and guitar. And I'm better, or I feel more comfortable coming up with lyrics and melody than coming up with chords. So it was a really good, we complemented each other, because he was very good at coming up with song structure, the chords, the foundation, and I was better at taking something like that and adding lyrics and melody. So we just started doing that right from the start. And the conversation was probably like, sure, I'll do lyrics and come up with melody. And so it just grew from there. And then our goal was to just write songs and then try to play out somewhere. By October of '92, we opened for the Bats at Maxwell's. Oh, so it was we were launching pretty quickly. And another connection to the Feelies is that Chris studied under Stan Janeski, of the drummer for the Feelies. Oh, and Stan told him one day, go out and find a band. And so that sounds a little familiar, right? So Chris was searching for, to form a band, and Rich was searching to find a band. So they found each other through placing an ad. Back then you'd place an ad in a newspaper.
Yeah.
And then the two of them were looking for more people to fill out the band. So the two of them placed an ad, and they were, I guess you could say, auditioning people. Different people would come by and they'd play, and either, well, obviously, I guess nothing really worked out. But one of the people who answered the ad was Michael Imperioli.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, so there is a rehearsal tape of Michael Imperioli and Chris and Rich playing. And he's given his blessing that we can use it, wherever we'd like. Oh my gosh. But there was only, I guess, I'm not sure how many songs they were working on at that point, but that was 1990. And then, and Michael decided to go to pursue acting rather than music. I mean, that was a good call on his part, because he obviously became very successful with his acting career. So then Chris and Rich, it's back to just the two of them. And then they got together they found two people and formed a band called Wow and Flutter. And they did they recorded a little bit, and Wow and Flutter was playing up until about February of 92. They played various shows in New York, New York, New Jersey area. And then that kind of fizzled out in February. And then I met them in March. So it was a pretty quick transition for Chris and Rich, going from Michael Imperioli to Wow and Flutter, and then Wild Carnation. That is amazing. Oh my gosh. I hope one day they decide to put that stuff, Michael Imperioli, out, because that would be fascinating. Yeah, we right now we're focusing on the re-release of Tricycle, but yeah, certainly we could try to do something with that. That would but just not, you have to do the right thing. Oh yeah. Everyone has to, well, although, like I said, Michael did give his blessing, but we really have to make sure, okay, it is really okay with him. True. Yeah. So, all right. So you mentioned the first album, Tricycle. That is out being re-released, remastered, and it's got a whole lot of extra stuff on it. Yes. And I went and listened to it, and oh my gosh, that sound just brought me right back to 90, 91. It's just that jangly alt pop sound. It was that almost REM sound. It was just, it's like a time machine listening to it. It was amazing. And I loved the way it was. Rising Tide. I think that might be my favorite song on the whole album. I absolutely love that song, and I love the live version that's on it a little later on in the album. I think that is my favorite track on the album, but there are so many great songs on there. Shaker Tune is awesome. Scarf Song, I love how the tempo speeds up in Scarf Song. And you've got some really wonderful songwriting especially in songs like Susquehanna 142. That is so that's about a train, and that ended up actually on a train compilation album. Did I read that right? Yes. Yeah, the Catskill Train. I think it was a fundraiser. Yeah, and that was just a few years ago. But yeah, anything to do with the train. I believe that they reached out to Chris, and then we gave permission to put it on there.
Laughing, shouting from
So the songs, if you listen to this Catskill album, our song is very different. It's really a lot of country type music.
Okay.
You know, more Johnny Cash like, or Hank Williams. And then there's this jangly, 12-string alternative tuning, on our track. So it's nice being on there, but I don't think we really blend well with the rest of the album.
But it stands out. It's noticeable.
Yeah,
so,
I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so. That's one way to put it. But I really like Dodger Blue because I don't know. I love songs with baseball in them. I think it's great.
Okay.
I think those are great.
How the sun got in my eyes when I went chasing after flies. How many clouds lay in the grass, it was hard to see. This isn't the way I had it planned. Somebody took it from my hands. Cleanse the stains, wipe my eyes. Tell me please that the good survive. Would someone tell me so I'll understand why you have to take.
You're from New Jersey. The album came out in '94, and the Dodgers left New York decades before. How did that song develop?
This is a longer story. I don't know if you want the longer story. So getting back to Michael Imperioli. So Michael Imperioli would have a book with him with lyrics in it. And so one of the songs that was captured on this Purcell tape is a song called Dodger Blue. But Rich and Chris really couldn't hear Michael all that well, but all that they could hear was occasionally him saying Dodger Blue. So they had no idea what Dodger Blue actually meant. But that particular song, so Rich wrote the song, and then Michael put lyrics and a melody on top of it. But then Michael left, and so now it's just back to that original song, which hadn't had a name. So the name Dodger Blue just stuck with it because that's what Rich and Chris were now referring to it as.
Okay.
So I start playing with them, and they say, "Oh, this is a song called Dodger Blue." Again, they have no lyrics, no melody, and the first thing I don't know whether I knew the whole Dodgers story or whether someone related to me, because Rich's father was a big Dodgers fan. He lived in Manhattan when he was growing up, or at least in teen years, and he was a huge Dodgers fan, and he was brokenhearted when they moved to LA, as many people were.
Yeah.
And, for years was still upset about it. So I don't know if it was the story of his father that influenced the song, or just learning about the history of the Brooklyn Dodgers through, baseball, like the Ken Burns documentary.
Mm-hmm.
However it happened, I knew of the Brooklyn Dodgers story from having been told or having seen it in a documentary. And I just kind of ran with it. I mean, I knew some of the basic facts, but in order to have a little more to the song, I just kind of embroidered a little bit, like what would it have been like to be one of the players.
Okay.
And, you're forced to another place, and, and then the Dodger, that was Emmett's Field where the Dodgers were.
Yeah.
So anyway, so now the stadium is going to come down. So, some of it is based on fact, and then some of it is embroidering a little bit. But after the album came out, there was a review. I don't recall who wrote this review, but they said Dodger Blue could be as much about the Feelies breaking up as the Brooklyn Dodgers being sold to LA.
Oh, wow.
And so I guess maybe subliminally it came through, But in a way, I could see that. It makes sense. Like the walls came down, the fans went home. It could be as much about a band being abandoned by a record company, and you're just not doing as well as you had been, when the fans would turn away. And so I could see that they might, see that within the lyric.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What was that?
I was gonna say it could be inferred that it's about the band breakup. I could see that.
Yeah, or anything that kind of comes apart and you can't control it, and you have to deal with it.
So the album has been remastered and being re-released with tons of extra stuff. What brought on the remaster and the idea to re-release it?
Well, I think any time you re-release something, you would remaster it. Well, especially going from CD to vinyl. And there are some, well, definitely there are releases where they just go right from the CD to vinyl, and the quality just isn't as good. So we put it in the hands of Scott Anthony of Storybook Sound in Maplewood, New Jersey. And so you have to, it's best to master it with the idea that it's going to vinyl, just to get the best quality. And he was able to kind of tweak and bring things out. We were looking for a slightly warmer sound, but when we got the digital files and played it through the stereo, so I should back up a little bit. We got our acetate, and so that's the test pressing.
Right.
So we put that on and had the digital files on the computer playing through the stereo, and we were A-B'ing it, and it sounded exactly the same. Wow. The album is a little bit quieter because the album is slightly long for vinyl, and generally if you have longer than the ideal, the volume is a little bit lower. It's not bad quality. It's just, you just need to turn the volume up a little bit. Like if you're playing a CD or a vinyl that's, like 20 minutes per side, it's going to be louder than something that's 25 minutes. So all you have to do is turn the volume up. Yeah, because there's just
so much space on vinyl to...
Exactly. And Wizard of True Star, that's just under an hour, so just under 30 minutes on each side. So if Todd could do it, we could do it.
Right.
So the quality is a really exact match, at least on our stereo system.
Oh, that's awesome.
You could not tell the difference between the digital file and the vinyl.
That is awesome.
Scott did a good job.
Yeah.
And does mastering for the Feelies.
Oh, okay. How did you choose the extra tracks? Because there's a lot of demos, and there's also a bunch, like almost an entire live show, it seems like, from 97.
Yes. So when we realized that, okay, we're going to be releasing this on vinyl, do we have any bonus tracks? Rich and I just started digging through stuff, and
stuff.
Where are those tapes? Where's this? Where's that?
Wow.
So we came across our original demos, which thankfully, things could be extracted from them. So we had demoed pretty much all the Tricycle album back in probably 93 or so, 92, 93. So that when we went to the studio, we had our act together. So we had those demos, and then the live performance was from a tour that we did in Germany in January, February of 92. And that was from Knust in Hamburg. The name of the club was Knust.
Ah, okay.
Knust. So luckily that sound person had thrown a tape in, or maybe it was even a DAT. We're not really sure, but we ended up with that show recorded live. It is a line recording. So Scott, I should say that Scott Anthony remastered the body of Tricycle, and then Delmore had someone remaster those live tracks and the demos. So they were able to improve the quality of both. But unfortunately, with a line recording in a club, you're getting the feed through the microphones. So the the sound is kind of, it's way in the background. Generally at a club, the instruments won't come through the sound system as much as the vocals. So typically coming through the mix, through the console, would be the vocals, some drums, and just a little bit of guitar. Bass is often direct, so that goes right into the line. So guitars are kind of, because the guitars are generally, the amps are loud enough in the room and they don't need too much supplementing.
Okay.
Vocals are, almost entirely supplemented.
Oh, I didn't know any of this. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So ideally, if there was more guitar on it, it would have been much better, but there's more guitar presence than there was on the original. So it was a step in the right direction.
Well, I was going to mention, and you just explained it, that I can hear the bass seems more up front in the live tracks, and it sounds really good. I really like it.
Thank goodness it was a good evening for bass playing. Just way, and the vocals too. They're just way out front. And I mean, our approach has been more that vocals are a layer, and that's kind of like the Trypes and REM, the Feelies, at least on the Good Earth. That the vocals shouldn't be way out front. They're another layer of the whole sound.
The live recording also has some really interesting things in it. You do some covers and some originals that are early versions of songs that ended up on Superbus, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. And actually, now that you mentioned Superbus is coming out on vinyl in the fall.
Oh, awesome.
That will be on Pine Hill Records. So that's at the manufacturer now, and we should be getting a test pressing in a few weeks. Oh, so it's kind of that's off and running as well.
Oh, I was listening to that.
Yeah, so 97 was in between Tricycle and then what would eventually become Superbus.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's like a 12-year delay between the two albums.
Yeah.
Is there, were you playing with Speed the Plough, or was there a reason that there was such a big gap between albums?
Well, there was Speed the Plough in between. The main gap was that Rich and I had a son in 2000. So Superbus was actually recorded in 2000 at the Pigeon Club in Hoboken, and James Mastro was the producer of it. He produced the album. So I was actually pregnant the whole time that we were recording. We started recording in May of 2000, and then finished up around October. So the last thing that we were doing was the vocals, and I was, pretty pregnant at that point. So yeah, no wonder our son is very into music, because that's all. I mean, he was hearing hours and hours of singing while he was inside.
Oh, that is awesome. Well,
so like John and Yoko, it wasn't deliberate. I think we figured all right, we'll have our baby, and then we'll start playing out again. And that's just not. I mean, if you have a nanny, it might be more realistic. But neither of us really. I mean, you just get so wrapped up and attached to your child that you're not even thinking about other things.
You can't just get up and go on tour.
Right. I mean, some people do, but that wouldn't have been natural for us. So it was done. It was, all the recording was done, and we had our master, and it sat until 2006, or actually probably more like 2005. And then by the time it was released, now with the manufacturing, artwork, acetates and everything, it was 2006. And we just released it on our own. We couldn't find anyone who was interested.
Oh, wow. Really?
So we put a couple ads out and started selling it on our own. But, obviously not a lot of copies sold.
I was listening to it today. It's on YouTube, and I was listening to it today, and I really like it. Catch a Curve is great. Mm-hmm. I love the Meadowlands. The Meadowlands is awesome. That sounds so spooky, and it's kind of fitting for the Meadowlands because growing up in New Jersey, I grew up hearing a lot of stories about all the dead bodies, like the dumping ground or in the swamps around the Meadowlands.
Yeah.
When it was, I don't remember. The water cleared. I looked into the river. There was a forest below. The roadways are pulled into the bog just below. Trees.
Well, there was that's based on a book. Oh, what's his name? John Sullivan. It's John Sullivan. It's a book called The Meadowlands, and it was an incredibly good book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. So the song was inspired by, after reading the book called The Meadowlands. And so a lot of the description in there is, inspired by his book.
Oh, wow. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. It's a really good, and it's a fairly fast read, but so it just gives you a lot of history of the Meadowlands and also parts of New York City, because basically the Meadowlands was a dumping ground for New York City.
Yeah.
So old train stations are dumped at the bottom there.
Jeez.
The old, I guess it was the Penn Station was dumped there. And in the book, well, I don't want to give too much of it away, but he sees some of the things that have been dumped there. Wow. And this description is just incredible.
Oh, I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
We've got the debut re-released with a bunch of extra tracks. You mentioned that you're working on the follow-up. So is this it for Wild Carnation, or are you guys going to play any live shows to support the releases? Or
well, if anyone wants us to play, sure. It's post-pandemic, it's a little more difficult. Even the Feelies have to wait a long time to play somewhere because there's so many bands trying to play again. And I believe that there are fewer clubs because some of them just didn't make it through, didn't stay in business after the pandemic.
That's a good point.
So it's just, I believe the scene is not as healthy, depending on how you look at it. I mean, there are some clubs that are doing well, and there are new places opening up, but they're bigger clubs, very professional, not so much like the clubs that were from the 80s.
Right.
Where you could pretty easily play at, various places in New York or New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
So we're hoping to have a few shows in Asbury Park over the summer. The last show we were supposed to do was March 13th of 2020. And we all know what happened that Friday the 13th. That's when everything shut down. So instead of heading to perform in Maplewood, New Jersey, we were going to college to bring my son home, or our son home, because everything was shutting down.
Wow.
So yeah. So it was just, the timing was just unbelievable.
Jeez, that's
yeah.
Well, hopefully there's some places playing or play places opening up for you to play. Like you said, I know there's a huge demand and not a whole lot of locations. So
so we will play wherever we can.
What is the best way for people to find the album, to order it and listen to it? And is there a social media presence for Wild Carnation?
Yeah. So this was a record store day release, this particular release.
Okay.
So there were 500 copies made, 475 went out, and we're getting feedback from people that they can't find it. At this point, Discogs has it, but very few copies are left. I would say go to the Delmore Recording Society Bandcamp page. And, I haven't personally gone there, but I believe you can order through there. Okay. And we are working on having a second pressing, although that's not official, but that is what we are attempting to do. So I guess once these 500 copies are definitely all sold, then that opens it up to do a second pressing and get that out there. I guess as soon as we can. In the meantime, the digital download will be available for purchase. Wild Carnation does have a Bandcamp page, but right now it's very minimal because we didn't want to, not that it will be a breach of contract, but putting things up for sale, the timing would not be very good to have done that right around record store day 2023. Yeah. So we're waiting a while. There are just a few songs that are available, some from compilations, and I think there's one track from Superbus, one track from Tricycle, and that's it for now. But we will eventually, when it's the right thing to do, we will put all of our music on Bandcamp. It was set up just to kind of get it going, get it up there and operating. Right. And then we'll eventually feed more things on there.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. At the time of this recording, it is up for pre-order for the digital album for Wild Carnation, like you said, on the Delmore Recording Society Bandcamp page. So it is up there, and you can pre-order it as we record this podcast. So by the time it comes out, it might be up, but who knows? I don't see a date.
It's supposed to be this coming Friday.
There we go. Yeah, I see it right now, April 20th. So by the time this comes out, it'll definitely be up and ready for purchase. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then there'll be more vinyl, and then Superbus will be in the fall on vinyl. Oh, again, remastered.
I was about to ask, are you doing the same thing where you have bonus material for that, or is that just going to be pretty much just the album?
I'm not sure right now. We're hoping that there will be bonus tracks. So Superbus, much like Tricycle, we demoed just about every song. So there are, pretty solid demos of all the Superbus material.
Oh, cool. That is awesome. Yeah. And is there a social media presence for the band?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook. So Wild Carnation. Yeah, just go to Facebook and then type in Wild Carnation. You should see a photo of 2 Matchbox cars in a garden. We also have a secondary Facebook page which shows the cover of Tricycle. So it's a tricycle with green ivy in the background. Either one, but the most active page is the one with the Matchbox cars.
So it's kind of that's the Superbus cover, right?
The Superbus cover, right?
Okay, cool.
And so we also do have a website, wildcarnation.com. although that's not as active as Facebook, but you can reach us there as well.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. And then, check out Bandcamp. But again, there's not a lot going on there right now.
Right.
But there will be. Excellent.
Well, I've really enjoyed the album. I'm looking forward to hearing the next remastered version, the remaster of Superbus, and the sound is fantastic. It just brings me back to my late high school, college days. So I love it. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you for re-releasing it and kind of bringing me back to a wonderful time. So I'm just enjoying this.
Thanks. And actually the jangle sound goes back to the 60s with the Byrds.
Right. Yeah. With the Rickenbackers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's on these albums. It's a 12-string Rickenbacker. And someone called it, a fan called it Jangle Pop Bliss. I love that. I love that term.
I like that. I'm going to use that as a hashtag on this thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending your evening with me and talking about some wonderful music. And I definitely want to go check out the Meadowlands book and give that a read too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's been my pleasure as well.
Don't say